Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are now moving away from the unit we had on functions and relations, and we're moving on to the trig unit. Today's lesson is going to be on right triangles and the Pythagorean theorem. Now, some of you maybe had this in grade 8, or maybe it's been a while. So I have to start back with right triangles. So right triangles have a right angle, okay? That right angle is always noted with a square in the corner. Squares and rectangles have square corners and they have right angles. All of the corners are right angles, okay? A right angle is an angle that is equal to 90 degrees, okay? Now, another thing that we need to know is what the hypotenuse is. The hypotenuse is the longest side. And the way to find the hypotenuse is that it is always opposite the right angle. So if I were to go to the right angle and draw, excuse me, an arrow away from that, this side here is the hypotenuse, right? It is the longest side, always opposite the right angle. Now, the first rule I want to be able to have you solve is really simple. It's a rule that says the sum, and the sum means to add. So you're going to add the angles of the right triangle, and it is always going to total 180 degrees, okay? So in example 1 here, if we want to find the missing angle, we know that this one is 90 degrees. We're told this angle here is 30 degrees. So we have this notation that we use that looks like the corner of a triangle. So that means angles at 30 degrees here. The angle is at 90 degrees here. So 90 plus 30 gives us 120. So how many more degrees would we have to be to get up to 180? So we would have to add 60 more onto that to equal 180. So x is going to equal 60 degrees. Now, again, notation, angle x is going to equal 60 degrees, and that's your units. A degree is, an angle is measured in degrees, and that small raised circle is the units, just like putting centimeters or millimeters on for measuring the length of the side. Okay, let's look at example B. We're given this angle here is 22 degrees. We're asked to find angle y. Okay, that's unknown. Now, this one doesn't have anything noted there, but you know if it has a square, it is 90 degrees. So now we've got 90 plus, oh, I wrote 20. 90 plus 22 is going to equal 112 degrees. And now you need to think, what else do you need to get up to a 90? Okay, so you're going to have to add 68 onto this to get 2 and 8 to be 10, and 6 and 1 and 1 is 8. So that equals 180. So this angle is going to have to be, so angle y is going to equal 68 degrees. Now, a simpler way to do this might be to think, okay, if this corner is 90, then 90 plus the other 2 gives us 180. So that means the other 2 must be 90. So those 2 give you 90 plus that 90, and you can sometimes get it a bit quicker by going 30 plus 60 is 90, right? 68 and 22 is 90. Okay, there's one way to get the angle if you've got 2 of them. Okay, so 2 angles, you can find the third one by knowing they add up to 180. Now the next part is on Pythagoras' theorem. So Pythagoras was a famous mathematician that came up with an idea that there was a relationship between the sides of a right triangle. Okay? And what he figured is that if we draw a square on the longest side, so I've got a little picture here, right? There's our triangle, our right triangle. This only works with right triangles. And remember, that's our longest side here. So we have a square on our longer side. So the square on the longer side is the sum. Remember, sum again means to add, right? So it is the sum of the squares on the shorter sides. So these two are the shorter sides. So if this was, say, a 3 by 3 square, that means it would have a size equal to 9. If this was a 4 by 4 square, it would have a size of 16 in the middle. 3 times 3 gives you 9, and 4 times 4 gives you 16. Now, what he discovered is that if you draw a square on all of the sides, the square on the larger side is the sum of the two smaller sides. So that would mean 9 plus 16 is going to equal 25. So the size of the square on the bigger side, in this case, is going to be 25. From that, you should be able to work out that this is going to be a 5 by 5 square. So now, we can figure out the length of a missing side by using this relationship. He came up with this formula. And the formula states that if we take one of the sides A and we square it, we make a square, and we take another side B and we square it, it's going to equal a third side we call C, its square. So square on a small side plus another square on the other small side is going to equal the square on the large side. Okay, so the big thing to remember is that this side has to be the hypotenuse. Okay, these two are the smaller sides. Okay, so how do we use this formula? Well, the first thing you would have to do is to substitute the values into the formula. Then you're going to square the numbers. So if you're given the two small sides, you square each of those. If you're given the hypotenuse, you square that in one of the small sides. Then you're going to add. So if you're given the two small sides, you're going to add the numbers. If you're given the big side and one of the small sides, you can subtract to get the other small side. So look at here, if we're given 25 and we're given 16, 25 minus 16 is going to give us 9. So in fact, we can go and subtract. The big side minus a small side is going to give us the other small side. Okay, so it depends on what's given, whether we add the two smaller sides or we subtract a bigger and a smaller side to get the other small side. Then our last step is we need to take the square root of both sides, and that gives us our answer, and of course we need to include units. Okay, so I'm going to do an example here. So the first thing I'd like you to do is to label the sides of the diagram. Okay, so we're going to go right across from the right angle, and that's the hypotenuse. Now, Pythagoras says a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And c is the longest side. The two small squares equal the bigger square. So we're going to call this side C. And then the other two sides, it doesn't matter which is which. I'm just going to go left to right, A and B. Okay? So we've got our A, B, and C sides. Now we're going to substitute what we've got. So A here is 4, so I'm going to put a 4 into the formula. Okay? So instead of our A, we're going to have 4, and it's going to be squared. Then we're going to substitute B. In this case, B is 2. So we're going to put a 2 in for the B, so it's going to be plus 2 squared. And then that's going to equal, instead of the c, we're going to put in the value that's given here, which is x squared. So we've substituted. The next step is to square the numbers. So remember, 4 squared means 4 times 4, which is 16. And 2 squared means 2 times 2, which is 4. Now, x squared means x times x, but it doesn't change anything. It still stays x squared, so we're going to leave that x squared. Okay? Now, we're given the two short sides here, so we're just going to add the two short sides together. So 16 plus 4 gives us 20. So we're going to have 20 on the right side is equal to x squared. So what that means is that the square off of here is a 20 square. What we're trying to figure out is how big is the side. So what number times itself gives you 20? Well, 4 times 4 is 16, that's too small, and 5 times 5 is 25, that's too big. So we know our number here is going to be somewhere between 4 and 5. 4 is too small and 5 is too big. So how do we get the exact answer? Well, you're going to use your calculators to take the square root, okay? And we have to do that of both sides. So now, if we take the square root of 20, okay, we punch it into our calculators and square root symbol, and then our 20, it's going to equal, and from my calculator, 4.4721359555. Now we also have to take the square root of the other side. Now, what is the square root of x squared? Well, what does square root mean? What number times itself? So what times itself equals x squared? Well, that's x. So now we know that x is going to equal this big long number. Now, I don't want you to show all those decimal places. I would like it rounded. So you're going to have to learn to round properly. You're cutting it off at 1 decimal place, okay? So right now, x is going to equal 4.4. Now you have to look at this number that's been cut off. That's a 7 or higher. If it's higher than 5 or higher, you're going to add 1. So this now becomes a 5 because you've added 1 to the 4. So now the answer is going to be 4.5. And we need units from our question in our answer. So that's 4.5 centimeters. I expect you to show your work on this. Substitute, square, add or subtract depending on the question, square root, give me the answer, rounded to 1 decimal place. Okay, let's look at a third example here where we're looking for a shorter side. So again, just like the other question, we want to start by labeling the diagram to make sure that we put the right values in the right part of the formula, right? So go across from our right angle, and this is going to be side C. The other ones are A and B. Doesn't matter which order you put those in, but the one opposite has to be C. So C is 5, A is 4.2, and B is Y. Substitute those in. So I'm going to start with the formula a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So our a is 4.2, so that's going to be 4.2. Don't forget you're squaring it. You're just taking the a out and putting the 4.2 in. Take the b out, and b is going to be our y. So plus y, and then that's squared. Take the c out, and the c is 5, so that's going to be 5 squared. So the next thing is to square the numbers. So 4.2 times 4.2. Okay, remember you're not adding them. It's 4.2 times 4.2, and that gives us 17.64. Y squared, you can't do anything with that, so that still stays y squared. 5 squared means 5 times 5, which is going to equal 25. Okay? Now, what we've been given is we've been given the longer sides, square, and a shorter side square. So we have to take the long one and subtract the short one. So what we're going to do is the same thing. To get y all by itself, you're going to subtract 17.65, which means we're going to subtract 17.65. Sorry, not 65, that's 64. Let me change that back to the right color, 64, from both sides. That means y squared is going to equal 25 minus 17.64, and we get 7.36. Our last step is we need to take the square root, because we need to figure out what the side y is, not the square off of y. Right now, y's square is 7.36. So take the square root of that. Now, to put some sense into this, if the square is 7, we know that a 3 by 3 square is 9. That would be too big. And a 2 by 2 square is 4, which is too small. So our number is going to be between 3 and 4. So take the square root of the other side. And now the square root of 7.36, according to my calculator, y is going to equal 2.7129. It's going to keep going. I need to cut it off here at 1 decimal place. Because this is a 4 less, we're just going to drop them off. We don't add 1. And y is going to equal 2.7. Now, in this case, it is millimeters in our question, so we have to have millimeters in our answer. We just solved it. Substitute square, subtract square root, rounded answer with units. Okay? Now, I've got a fourth example here. And this is where we have, we're going to use Pythagoras' theorem here for a more complicated question. So we're asked to find the length of side x. So one thing is, with Pythagoras, we need to have 2 sides to get a missing third side. Okay, now I forgot to draw in the right angle. So this has got a right angle on there, and this has got a right angle here. So we end up with, in fact, 2 triangles put together. Okay. Now, if we want to find side x, we need to know the length of the other 2 sides. So we've got 5, but the other side is y. We don't know what it is. So we can't have 2 unknowns and be able to figure out what the missing side is. But what we do have is that this side y is common between the first triangle and the second triangle. And if we can use the 2 given sides on the first triangle to figure out its unknown, then we can figure that side and use that one and this one to figure out this. So there is a problem because you need 2 sides to find the third side. So we will need to find side y first. Okay? So let's do that. We're going to take, first off, triangle 1. And we're going to substitute this, right? That is side C, and these are A and B. Okay? So A is 4, so we're going to have 4 squared, plus B is 3, we're going to have 3 squared, is going to equal our y, which is squared. So now square the numbers, and 4 squared is 16, plus 3 squared is 9, and that's equal to our y squared. All we're doing is squaring the numbers. Now we're going to add the numbers. 16 plus 9 gives us 25. And y squared is equal to 25. After we've added, we're going to take the square root. And we've figured out that the square root of 25 is 5, and the square root of y squared is y. Okay, so y is equal to 5 meters, right? Got our units there. So now we're going to use the fact that this equals 5 meters to give us the 2 sides we need to figure out for side x. So now we're going to go on to the second triangle. And on the second triangle, again, this opposite, that's going to be our side C. One is A and one is B. So they're 5 and 5, so 5 squared plus 5 squared for A and B equals substitute our x squared. So that's going to be 25 plus 25 is equal to x squared. Now add the numbers, and 50 is going to equal our x squared. So now the last step here is to take the square root. And when we take the square root of 50, remember, 7 times 7 is 49, which is too small. And 8 times 8 is 64, which is too big. So our number is going to be between 7 and 8. So when I take the square root of 50, we're going to get x is equal to 7.07106, etc. We're cutting it off at 1 decimal place. So right now it's 7.0. This is a 5 or higher, so we're going to add 1. And we get x is going to equal 7.1. And in this case, it's meters. Okay. So on a question like this one, you're going to end up with being worth twice as many marks, figuring out the first missing side and then using that to figure out the second missing side. Okay, now lastly, we're going to have word problem assignment as well. So on word problems, I want you to draw a diagram. When we draw a diagram, we are sure then which side of the right triangle you're going to find. Are you finding the hypotenuse or are you finding the short side? Okay, so diagrams are essential to make sense of the question. So let's look at the question. It says a 10-foot ladder is leaning against a 7-foot wall. The top of the ladder is exactly at the top of the wall. So now the ladder is taller than the wall. So that means if the top of the ladder is at the top of the wall, the ladder is going to have to be not right against the wall. It's going to be, the foot of the ladder is going to be out from the wall. So now we want to know how far from the wall is the bottom of the ladder. So I'm going to draw a picture. We'll start off with, I'll draw a wall, okay? And I'll make this maybe a brick wall so that, you know, it makes more sense. Okay, now this wall is 7 feet. Okay. Now leaning against that is a 10-foot ladder. So right at the top is where a 10-foot ladder is, and it's going to have to, in fact, be out from the wall a bit because it is longer than the 7 feet. Okay, so that's going to be 10 feet. So now we're asked how far from the wall is the bottom of the ladder. So this is the distance. There's the bottom of the wall and there's the bottom of the ladder. This is the x that we're looking for. Now in order to solve this, we also need to find the right angle because Pythagoras' theorem only works with right angle triangles. So we're looking for which corner of the triangle that's being formed by the ladder and the wall is the right angle. And I'm hoping you can see that this is where the right angle is. Okay, that is our 90 degrees. So that means that opposite of that is going to be our hypotenuse. So this is going to be side C. So one is A and one is B, doesn't matter. When we substitute that into our formula now, A is 7, so we're going to have A squared, which is 7 squared. B is x, so plus x squared is going to equal C, which is 10 squared. Next, square the numbers, so that's 7 times 7, which is 49, plus x squared is equal to 10 times 10, which is 100. Now you're going to subtract 49 from both sides, and you get x squared is equal to 51. Now, again, 7 times 7 is 49, and 8 times 8 is 64, so we know that this number of 51 is going to be when we take the square root, is going to be between 7 and 8. That's an estimate. It's going to be pretty close to 7 because 51 is close to 49. So take your calculator, find the square root of 51, and you're going to get x is equal to 7.1414, etc. Now remember, we're cutting this off at 1 decimal place. So again, this is a 4 or lower, so we're just going to drop those off, and x is equal to 7.1. Go back to the question, and it is feet for units. Okay? So draw a picture so you're making sense. Find the right angle so that you know which of the measurements is going to be the hypotenuse and which is going to be the shorter sides. All right, take care, and hope to see you guys soon.